The hum of the lawnmower was my meditation. It was a bright, Saturday morning in May, the kind where the sun feels like a warm hand on your back and the smell of cut grass is the perfume of a well-ordered life. I'm Mark, and this was my domain, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath slice of the American dream in a quiet suburb of Cincinnati. My wife, Sarah, was inside, probably tackling the Everest of laundry that our family of 3 somehow generated. Our son, Leo, who had just turned 7, was somewhere in the house, a quiet whirlwind of Legos and imagination. I was wiping the grass clippings from the mower's deck when I felt a small presence beside me. Leo stood there, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a curious stillness. He was clutching something in his hand, hidden against his palm. "Hey, buddy," I said, switching off the mower. The sudden silence felt heavy. "All done with your fortress of doom?" He didn't answer right away, just scuffed his sneaker against the concrete of the driveway. His brow was furrowed in that way it did when he was working up the courage to ask for an extra half-hour of screen time. "Dad," he finally said, his voice small. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Leo, anything." I leaned against the warm metal of the mower, expecting a question about dinosaurs, or maybe a request for a popsicle. He took a deep breath, the kind that hitches a little, and opened his hand. Lying on his palm was a bottle of Sarah's nail polish. It wasn't a subtle color. It was a brilliant, almost electric cobalt blue, shimmering with tiny particles of glitter that caught the morning sun and threw tiny, dancing sapphires onto his skin. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. "Can you paint my toenails with this?" The world didn't stop, but it certainly tilted. Out of all the things I had prepared for as a father, skinned knees, broken toys, questions about where babies come from, this was not on the list. My mind, for a split second, became a frantic search engine trying to process the query. Why? Is he okay? Is this a phase? What will people think? What will Sarah think? What will the guys at the construction site think if they see it? I saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the sheer bravery it took for a 7-year-old boy to ask his dad, his big, lawn-mowing, truck-driving dad, to do something that so clearly lived outside the little box of boy things. I saw the tremor in his lower lip, bracing for a refusal, a laugh, or a dismissive, "No, son, that's for girls." And in that tilted moment, my own childhood flashed before my eyes. Not a dramatic one, but a quiet memory of wanting a My Little Pony because I was fascinated by the bright colors and the brushable manes. I'd mentioned it once to my own father, a good man, a former Marine. He hadn't gotten angry, just gave a short, dismissive grunt and said, "Don't be silly, Mark. That's a girl's toy." And that was that. The desire was locked away, not out of shame, but out of a simple, accepted understanding of the rules. Looking at Leo, I didn't want his rules to be born from refusal. I didn't want his curiosity to be something he learned to hide from me. The internal panic subsided as quickly as it had arrived, washed away by a wave of pure, uncomplicated love for this small, wonderful human being. I smiled, hoping it reached my eyes. "Yeah, buddy," I said, my voice thankfully steady. "We can do that, but we've got to do it right. Let's go find Mom." The relief that flooded his face was like sunrise. It was a total, radiant transformation. He grinned, a gap-toothed, glorious thing, and his whole body seemed to vibrate with joy. "Really, really. But fair warning," I said, taking the bottle from his outstretched hand. "I've never done this before. It might be a little messy." "That's okay," he chirped, already bouncing on his toes. "We can fix it." We found Sarah in the laundry room, mid-fold, a mountain of my t-shirts and her blouses slowly being tamed into neat stacks. She looked up as we entered, her expression shifting from domestic focus to curiosity as she saw the look on our faces and the bottle of nail polish in my hand. "Well, hello, you two. What's going on?" Leo, now emboldened, practically shouted, "Dad's gonna paint my toenails." Sarah's eyes met mine over his head. There was a micro-expression there, a flicker of surprise, a quick assessment. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod that said, "It's okay. I've got this." Her face softened into a warm, supportive smile. That was Sarah. She was the steady, intuitive heart of our family, always a beat ahead of me in understanding the emotional weather. "That's a great color, Leo," she said. "Where did you find it?" "In your bathroom. It's the color of Blue's claws from Bluey," he explained, referencing his favorite cartoon dog. "Ah, of course," she said, winking at me. "Well, you've picked the best man for the job. Your dad has very steady hands." We decided the back porch was the perfect operating theater, good light, easy to clean up any potential spills, and a private space for this momentous occasion. I pulled out 2 old lawn chairs while Sarah supplied the essentials: acetone remover, cotton balls, and a base coat she insisted would make it last longer and look more professional. Leo sat in one chair, kicking off his shoes and socks with frantic excitement. I sat facing him, his small, bare feet in my lap. They were the feet of a little boy, dusty from the floor, a little scraped on the heel from a recent fall, perfect. Okay, surgeon, Sarah said, handing me a cotton ball soaked in remover. First, we prep the site. Clean the nails. I took Leo's foot in my hand, his tiny ankles so fragile in my work-roughened palm. I carefully wiped each toenail, the sharp smell of acetone cutting through the sweet spring air. Leo watched, utterly mesmerized. Now, the base coat, Sarah instructed, playing the role of head nurse perfectly. She handed me the clear bottle. I unscrewed the tiny brush. My hands, which could swing a sledgehammer or maneuver a heavy load of drywall, suddenly felt enormous and clumsy. The first stroke was a globby mess. Whoa, easy there, Picasso, Sarah teased gently. Leo giggled. It's okay, Dad, just do little strokes. I took a breath, focused, and tried again. Little strokes. It was like painting a very small, curved model. I managed to get a thin, relatively even coat on all 10 toes. We had to wait for it to dry. The 3 of us sat in a comfortable silence, listening to the birds and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog. It was a strangely sacred pause. Then came the main event. The blue glitter. I shook the bottle as instructed, the tiny ball bearing inside clacking a frantic rhythm. I dipped the brush and pulled it out, laden with a gleaming, azure glob. Ready? I asked Leo. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the brush. The first touch of color to his big toenail was a moment I will never forget. The polish went on smoothly, a shocking, vibrant blue that transformed his plain little toe into something jewel-like. The glitter caught the light, sparkling with an inner fire. Leo let out a soft, wow. I concentrated, my tongue peeking out from the corner of my mouth in intense focus. I painted each nail, one by one. The world narrowed to this tiny canvas, to the trust in my son's eyes, to the supportive presence of my wife. The initial, frantic questions in my mind had gone completely silent. All that was left was the simple, profound act of giving my son something he had asked for. I finished the last pinky toe. 10 little sapphires winked up at us from my lap. They're beautiful, Dad, Leo whispered, his voice full of awe. My heart squeezed. Yeah, buddy, they are. Sarah handed me the top coat, and I sealed our work. Then came the final, most challenging part, waiting for them to dry completely. We devised a system where Leo would sit with his feet splayed out, wiggling his fingers to pass the time while I read him a chapter from his latest Dog Man book. He kept looking down at his feet, a proud, secret smile playing on his lips. Later that day, the real world began to knock on the door of our blue-toed bubble. We were going to the local grocery store. As we were getting ready to leave, Leo pulled on his socks and shoes, hiding his masterpiece. Are you sure you don't want to wear sandals? Sarah asked gently. He shook his head, a shadow of uncertainty crossing his face. No, what if someone sees? The comment hung in the air. I knelt down in front of him. Leo, listen to me. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your toenails. They're awesome, but it's also okay if you want to keep them just for us, or just for you. It's your choice. You don't have to show anyone until you're ready. He thought about this, then nodded, opting for the safety of his closed-toe sneakers. At the store, he was his usual self, racing ahead to look at the toy aisle, helping us put items in the cart. But I noticed he was very careful about how he walked, as if protecting a precious secret. It struck me then that this wasn't just about pretty colors. For him, it was an act of self-expression, and with that came a new, small weight of self-consciousness. The test came that evening. My older brother, Mike, and his family were coming over for a barbecue. Mike is a great guy, a football coach at the local high school, with a handshake that could crack walnuts and a laugh that could fill a stadium. He's also, in his own way, a traditionalist. As the smell of burgers and hot dogs filled the backyard, the kids, Leo and his 2 cousins, ran around playing tag. The sun was setting, casting a long, golden light. At one point, Leo, hot and flushed, plopped down on the grass to take off his shoes and socks to cool his feet in the grass. And there they were. The 10 brilliant blue beacons. The world didn't stop, but it did slow down. Mike was mid-sentence, telling a story about a player, when his eyes drifted down and caught the flash of color. He stopped talking. His wife, Jen, noticed next. She nudged him gently. Leo froze, looking from his toes to his uncle's face, his own expression a mask of sudden terror. Mike looked at Leo's feet. Then he looked at me. His gaze was unreadable for a long second. My fatherly instincts were on high alert, my body tensing, ready to step in, to defend, to explain. Then Mike looked back at Leo, and a slow grin spread across his face. "Well, would you look at that," he boomed. "Leo, those are the coolest toenails I have ever seen." "What's that?" "The color of the ocean." Leo's fear melted away, replaced by a wave of relief and pride. "It's Bluey's claw color," he declared, scrambling to his feet to show his uncle properly. "No kidding," Mike said, examining them with genuine interest. "That's some serious glitter action. You'll be able to see your feet in the dark." The moment passed. The conversation moved on. Jen started asking Sarah about the Polish brand. The kids went back to playing, Leo now proudly barefoot. I caught Mike's eye across the patio. He gave me a small, knowing nod. It wasn't a nod of approval, exactly. It was more a nod of understanding. A recognition that the world was bigger and more colorful than the boxes we sometimes try to put it in. After everyone had left and we had put a sleepy, happy Leo to bed, Sarah and I collapsed on the couch. The house was quiet, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. "You were amazing today," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder. I was terrified for a second there, with Mike, I admitted. "I know, but you handled it perfectly. You handled all of it perfectly." She paused. "What were you thinking, when he first asked you?" I took a moment, searching for the words. "I was thinking about my dad. And the My Little Pony." I told her the story, the one I hadn't thought of in decades. "And I just thought, I never want to be the reason Leo stops asking me things. I never want to be the wall his curiosity runs into." Sarah squeezed my hand. "You're not a wall, Mark. You're a bridge." The blue polish lasted for over a week. It began to chip at the edges, little flecks of it ending up in his socks and in the bath. Leo loved watching it change, pointing out each new chip like a badge of honor. He never asked to paint his fingernails, and he hasn't asked for the toes to be repainted since. It was a specific, fleeting desire that was fulfilled. But the impact of that Saturday morning was permanent. It opened a door. Leo now asks me things with a new kind of freedom. He'll point out a dress he thinks is pretty, or ask if he can help me bake a cake instead of helping me fix the car, and there's no hesitation in his voice. He knows his dad's answer will start with, "Yes," or at the very least, "Let's talk about it." It changed me, too. I look at the men I work with, the ones who talk about their sons only in terms of sports and toughness, and I see the invisible cages they're building, both for their kids and for themselves. I'm not a perfect father, not by a long shot. I still get impatient, I still get tired, I still sometimes default to, "Not now, buddy." But I try to listen harder now. I try to hear the question behind the question. The most profound lesson was this: my son wasn't asking me to understand some deep, complex part of his identity. He wasn't making a political statement or challenging gender norms in a conscious way. He was a 7-year-old boy who saw a color that sparkled like a cartoon dog's claws and thought, "I want my toes to look like that." His request was one of pure, simple aesthetic joy. All the baggage, the fear, the what-ifs, that was all my stuff. That was the noise of the world I had absorbed and was, for a terrifying moment, prepared to pass on to him. By saying yes, I didn't just give him blue toenails. I quieted the noise. I gave him permission to find joy in unexpected places. I gave him the confidence that his father's love is not conditional on him fitting into a predetermined mold. A few nights ago, as I was tucking him into bed, he looked at me with those serious eyes of his. "Dad, yeah, buddy, remember when you painted my toenails blue?" A smile spread across my face. "Of course I remember, Leo. How could I forget?" He snuggled deeper under his comforter. "That was the best day." And as I kissed his forehead and turned out the light, I knew with absolute certainty that he was right. It wasn't the day I finished mowing the lawn. It was the day I stopped building a wall around my son's heart and started building a bridge to it, one tiny, glittering, blue stroke at a time.